everybody, it's Sid from Cool Moviegram, your source for everything about cool movies. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and just let me know what you think about my channel. And also check out my other stuff and follow me on Instagram and all the usual now. Oh, today's video is going to be a, it's a list. And yeah, this was inspired by a video that one of my Asian Cinema Circle comrades, aka Will, aka Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, had actually put out a list of his top 10 Hong Kong shootouts. So shootouts from Hong Kong movies. So yeah, so without further ado, I would just like to more or less just might as well crack on with it. Okay, number 10 is a shootout from the finale of The Longest Night, which is I think it was 97 or a 1997 movie or 98 movie starring Tony Leung and Lau Ching-wan, about a corrupt cop who's kind of like set up, but at the same time he's trying to kind of like just escape from Macau, and pretty much a lot of murky triad figures involved, and he's got the cops and the gangsters after him. And Lau Ching-wan is playing like a hitman who's pretty much just trying to take him at the same time. And this shootout is kind of like, it's a lot different from like what you would normally expect from a Hong Kong movie. The shootouts tend to be more like between a lot of people. Like there's either maybe a couple of good guys or one good guy against a bunch of bad guys. But this is just two people just going at it, and they're trying to kind of like just survive and literally kill. It's either kill or be killed at this point. And yeah, that's what makes it really good, is just the use of like lighting and cinematography. Because it's actually quite a dark scene in terms of the like, for example, just the aesthetics of it. It's actually shot in darkness, but then the only light you see is like pretty much like from reflected mirrors, and you see it kind of when they shoot in the mirrors themselves, like in this kind of like this warehouse of mirrors, I think it is, where it's actually kind of set. And it's like the fact you see all the mirrors kind of break up, and that kind of provides light for the same time. And also you see like them kind of like the reflections of these characters, and they're trying to kind of like shoot one another, which is kind of reminiscent of the ending for Enter the Dragon, where Bruce Lee and Shikian go head to head at the end in that maze of mirrors. But yeah, that's kind of like a really kind of like a well shot scene, and it was kind of really outside the box in my opinion, which is why I would kind of like put it down in my kind of like in my last in my top 10 spot, because it was something completely different. Number 9 is breaking news, a Johnny To film, which is from I think 2004. This film came out 2003 or 4, and yeah, I mean the film opens with one long tracking shot, and it kind of opens with a confrontation between a bunch of mainland criminals who have actually just robbed a bank, and it was pretty much and also the cops, and it's just kind of like the way that it's captured. It was almost has this very Michael Mann-esque man type of feel to it, where it kind of just feels really kind of like just almost like a documentary being shot. It's like, it just feels so real. The fact you got these guys coming in one long take, which is about 7 minutes long. You kind of see them kind of just shoot at one another, like the way the camera just kind of like just pans all around, and it just kind of looks so effortlessly natural. And even the sound effects of the actual bullets, which kind of like when they're shooting one another, just echoing the actual streets of Hong Kong. And this kind of more or less, again, it does kind of hark back to Heat, which is the Michael Mann movie with where Robert De Niro's character and his crew rob the bank. And yeah, it's just kind of like, but then of course after that it just kind of goes into like just usual normal kind of like multiple shots kind of filmmaking, and it is pretty much good. It's just a lot of explosions, and the way that he's kind of handled, again, proving that Johnny To is a master of action film or filmmaking in general. He is one of like the greatest auteurs from, that was working in like the 80s, 90s, 2000. Well, pretty much in the 90s was where it kind of broke out, and the 2000s, and even up until like the 2010s, he was making some great movies. And again, he showed that he could do crime dramas and everything else, and also do action sequences and handle them with great expertise. And moving on to number 8, which is A Better Tomorrow. The restaurant scene where Chow Yun-fat's character Mark is out for revenge after his best friend Sung Ji-ho is arrested and set up. So he decides to settle the score and goes to a restaurant in Taiwan and literally just kind of blasts, kills the guys that were responsible. The film itself is a groundbreaking classic. It kind of redefined the genre itself. It kind of created what was called gun fu. John Woo films are inspired a lot, especially his early work was kind of like his breakthrough action movies. Were inspired a lot by Japanese samurai or and even Chung Che films with Chung Che, who the Shaw Brother veteran, who's also John Woo's mentor. Where these characters have this kind of code of brotherhood, where instead of like, for example, clans, they have the triads, and instead of like swords, they have guns. And even the way that Chow Yun-fat is brandishing the guns, it's pretty much like you'd expect like a swordsman just using his weapon, like using his blade. It's like an extension of him. And he's able to kind of like use finesse and his skill to actually kill unalive people. And also it's just the cinematography again. I mean, John Woo just captures the locale of the restaurant, the way that it kind of like just opened. I mean, the setting of the scene. I mean, Chow Yun-fat kind of shows his kind of ability of acting in this scene. I mean, which this movie also got him his Best Actor award at the Hong Kong Film Awards when it was released. It was such a big hit as well, and made him a star after a string of like box office failures. But this film, it kind of like broke that kind of mold, and it made him a kind of literal overnight success. And I mean, the way that he starts off, where he's kind of like just kind of going through the corridors, being playful with this attractive lady, and then he's got this look of like playfulness on his face, but he's placing guns in these pots along the corridor. But then as soon as she kind of like disappears, and he's like, goes from smiling to like, deadpan serious. He's just really kind of like ready and determined. And even that scene, the way that the scene opens was pretty much, he shoots the guy in the middle, and then who's sitting down, his main target in the shoulder, and then he kills one guy to the left and right, which was pretty much inspired, which kind of inspired The Matrix. I mean, that lobby shootout, the way that opens, where Neo just kind of pushes one of the security guards, and then just has 2 machine guns, and he just crosses his arms and just blasts the 2 guys. That was on each side. That was pretty much there. And even the way that Neo was kind of dressed, he had the shades on, he had the overcoat, like a black overcoat, and he's brandishing 2 guns in the manner of Chow Yun-fat. That was pretty much John Woo right there. And this scene again is just like the way it kind of follows John Woo. I mean, John Woo follows, like, for example, Chow Yun-fat from one location, like for example the corridor, into the actual kind of like dining room where these guys are, this private room. He just kind of literally blasts everything away. I mean, the blood squibs, and you got these kind of like multiple guys just getting killed, but at the same time you see the bullets kind of, it just captures like the bullets just shooting up everything on the table, and it just kind of like, and people screaming, shooting, and like getting killed. And the way that it kind of like just pulls out, just follows Chow Yun-fat into where the guns are in the pots, and sees those other guys coming. He just kind of just kills them off. And it's almost like watching a modern day, like samurai movie but with guns. And again, I mean, this is pretty much what the movie that coined the phrase gun fu, which was pretty much what was a lot of Hong Kong action was kind of like being referred to as like just kung fu or swordplay movies with guns instead of well, swords or fancy kind of like kung fu weapons and traditional martial arts clothing or traditional Chinese clothing. I mean, nothing like, you know, this was completely out of the park at the time. Number 7 is another John Woo film from 1990 called Bullet in the Head. I mean, this was his kind of like his passion project, which at the time, which didn't really kind of like take off much on the box office, but again, it kind of later on found a big audience and has become a favourite of many. The scene is where the main characters, which is like Tony Leung, Jackie Chung and Wei Lee, along with Simon Yam, are to actually kind of like rob a crime lord in Saigon, and also kind of break free, like kind of help rescue a singer who's kind of kept like forced to kind of like perform on an illegal contract, and also is kind of like hooked onto drugs and you know, other vices. But the fact is that they want to kind of like save her from this hellhole, bring her back to Hong Kong, but and also rob the guy's gold. And the way that this scene is captured again, it's like, you know, bits of slow-mo, you know, the camera's just kind of like panning around, kind of like capturing like, you know, the zoom-ins and just again, just the use of like explosions, bullets, and like you know, just the emotions of these characters. It just kind of is captured great, because you see how, like, for example, one of the characters, which is Wei Lee's character, who's kind of like become very corrupted because he's the fact that he's got his hand on this this big kind of like box of gold, and he starts like kind of like losing it, and the fact that he's kind of like feeling like, you know, he's even kind of like putting his friends at risk and whatnot. I mean, as if you've seen the film, you kind of find out later that, for example, it completely changes his kind of personality and even his attitude towards his friends. And you know, one of the coolest things was, and this was, Simon Yam was just so kind of like out the box and like so awesome in this movie, playing Luke, who's like this Eurasian hitman working in Saigon, and he's like pretty much using things like, for example, he has these cigars which are like pretty much dynamite sticks. He just kind of like just pulls off a bit of them and just use them kind of like blow up doors and, you know, explode kind of like just a bunch of kind of henchmen. And also at the same time you have him kind of using things like not just the guns and stuff, even the throwing knives to kind of like to kill people. And yeah, you know, he was just pretty much really cool, just kind of him there, just kind of like waiting for something to explode, and he's just there sitting, like standing around waiting for the doors of the safe to kind of like to explode. He just kind of puts the dynamite stick in there, and it's like, you know, he just kind of winces a little. And in an interview he had been discussing this film, he even said that was actually kind of like, you know, it almost kind of made him, it made him lose like hearing in one of his ears, and it also even spooked him out of it, because that was actually an actual explosion happening like pretty much just a few feet away from him. And yeah, that was but it was a great scene, and it was kind of like, this is, you know, where a turning point in the story of the film happens. I mean, so it captures the emotional kind of like essence of the characters themselves, and see them changing, like becoming like you know, changing from the kind of people that they were when they left Hong Kong. Number 6, okay, is City on Fire, the heist and the getaway, where of course Chow Yun-fat's character, who's an undercover cop, I mean, in Ringo Lam's film, that which inspired Reservoir Dogs. And yeah, of course, this is the scene where, okay, the robbery actually itself goes wrong, and it kind of turns into this really kind of like chaotic, very kind of like signature Ringo Lam kind of like sequence of mayhem, including like bullets, loads of people getting kind of like killed, you know, cars kind of being flipped and crashed, and you know, people on both sides being ruthless and kind of like just merciless towards one another, and you know, it's kind of like also kind of like emotions being invoked at the same time. This scene was pretty much. I mean, there's a section in this, a sequence in this scene where Danny Lee's character, who's actually playing against type, he's not playing the cop, he's an actual kind of like a professional thief, decides to kind of, you know, he kills off like a bunch of police officers with two guns in a car, like in a jeep that comes across, and he just kind of starts blasting it, and that pretty much was like lifted by Tarantino in his 1992 debut. And of course, this film itself, I mean, again, it's just like, it's a brilliant film, but also at the same time, I mean, this sequence itself, you see them kind of like just trying to get away, which kind of also kind of like leads on to a great car chase. But this shootout kind of exchange that happened is just kind of like, it's just very intense, very kind of like, just looks painful and just insane. It's just like, I'm thinking a scene like this, again, when you see films like this, and you go, how the hell did they allow this to be filmed on the streets of Hong Kong? And it just kind of baffles me even to this day. I'm thinking, I don't think anyone would be able to shoot something that intense and realistic looking at this moment, you know, present day. I mean, or even after that. I mean, because it just looked too real and vivid. And Ringo Lam was known for kind of like making his scenes look as real as possible. I mean, it's not as like hyper stylized in the sense of like John Woo's kind of, or even Johnny To's gunplay. This is pretty much like just looks real, raw, gritty, and like kind of almost has another documentary type of feel to it. Number 5 is A Better Tomorrow 2. I'm choosing the scene from the hotel in New York where Chow Yun-fat and a grief-crazed Dean Shek playing Long are, you know, kind of like battling against mafia kind of henchmen and trying to kind of like get out alive. And yeah, I mean, the ending sequence itself, that's kind of like just a movie in its own. Like, that's just kind of like action cinema royalty. Like, it's one of like the most, as Will had pointed out, is one of the most craziest scenes, like one of the best moments of action cinema ever. It's like pretty much a half an hour of like complete carnage and violence. And but this scene itself, it's just kind of like, you know, again, it's just captured so beautifully. I mean, John Woo again himself knows a lot about. I don't know if this scene was directed by Choi Hawk, who's trying to take a lot of the creativity from John Woo in this movie. But whoever it was, it kind of captured the locale, the seediness of the hotel that they're in, but at the same time, it had the emotional weight of like how, you know, Chow Yun-fat's character Ken, who is kind of like, his road restaurant is blown up, and the mafia guys are after them. And you know, he has to kind of like literally, you know, he gets guns from like a shady arms dealer, and he decides, and ammunition, and he's just there using those to kind of like, he's just shelling up, saying that he's got no regrets, and at the same time he's trying to tell well, the grief crazed Long, which is also known as Si-suk, which is fourth uncle, who is an elder in the triad, a reformed gangster. And he's telling him to kind of snap out of it because he's not used to seeing him in this kind of like helpless, pitiful kind of like you know, state. And he says that, you know, I've got no regrets, and, you know, you have to die there, you know, sit here, die, waiting for someone to pity you, or you can fight back with me. And it's just kind of like, you know, it's just kind of him just blasting, you know, blasting a 12 gauge or something, like just a big shotgun, you know, just killing people through, like you see blasting through doors and just like kind of bullets just splatting through, blood scripts going everywhere. And of course you got these, you know, it's just these like, you know, men in like dark suits just kind of like literally just, you know, coming for the kill. Really, that's pretty much it. And also, you know, Chow Yun-fat also kind of uses his two guns. And like, you know, he's way before Hard Boiled, he kind of like, you see him, this is like in 1987, so 5 years before Hard Boiled, you see him kind of slide down an actual staircase itself on his back and just kind of like killing a mafia henchman with two guns, and of course also kind of like just dodging kind of like guys in cars that are trying to shoot at them at the same time outside. And it's just a very intense scene. The music, the emotions, the cinematography, like just capturing like the kind of the recoil and the kind of like just the just the devastating impact of the bullets themselves. Like it's captured brilliantly in this scene, and with mixture of like pretty much fast paced and also slow motion action. And which kind of like is one of my favorite kind of like of shootouts. Now, of course, the first A Better Tomorrow film is miles better, much better kind of like in terms of like filmmaking and storytelling and such. But this sequence from A Better Tomorrow 2 is just like it has always kind of stuck with me. Number 4 is from Exiled, the Doctor's scene. It's a Johnny Toe movie from like 2005 or 6, I think. And yeah, it's about a former hitman who's kind of like marked by the Triads after he failed to kill a Triad boss. And 2 of his former friends, who are also Triad hitmen, want to save him, and 2 of them are actually kind of like following their orders and saying that they have to be killed. But then, of course, things kind of change where they decide that what their boss is doing is wrong. But then, of course, this is where the Nick Chun's character Wall is injured, and he has to get like kind of treated, for his gunshot wound. He has to get treated by an underground doctor. And but the thing is, Simon Yam, who's like a sadistic, ruthless crime lord or triad boss, is also kind of like shot. He actually goes to get treatment from the same guy because they're all crooks and they all kind of end up at the same place. And eventually, this kind of ensues into a kind of like an intense shootout. And again, it's just captured amazingly with the movement of the camera and like the use of color, lighting, and the music again is very kind of like effective. And one thing I really found really impressed about this film is just the amount of gun smoke that the gunshots kind of like let off, and even like the way that the blood just kind of sprays out from like these squibs that they're using. It just almost kind of makes it feel like a spaghetti western where like these guys are like gunslingers who are just kind of like shooting at one another, not really kind of like using much of a technique, but there's just kind of like just going for the kill. But then it's just expertly choreographed in terms of the action sequences, even the cinematography, and even the ending of the scene. The way the scene finishes is just kind of like, it is just absolutely insane, and just kind of like just really kind of highly emotional. And definitely, I mean, this is kind of one of the films that solidified Johnny Toe as literally one of like the next kind of like maybe the successor to John Woo as someone who can make great action movies. Number 3 is Long Arm of the Law. It's the Walled City shootout. Now, this movie from 1984, again, a very groundbreaking classic. About a bunch of mainland criminals, like ex-mainland Red Army soldiers who kind of use their kind of expertise in weaponry and warfare as a means of committing robberies to make money in Hong Kong. And of course, after a daring heist at a jewelry store, they get kind of like on the run from the police, and they kind of like end up in a doctor's surgery as one of their fellow comrades is actually injured, and he needs to kind of get a bullet taken out, and he's kind of like in critical condition. And the Wall City South was an area of Kowloon, which I believe in 92 or 93, it was actually kind of like exploded. It was blown up, and kind of like they demolished it, and which was also captured in the film Crime Story by Kirk Wong starring Jackie Chan. And this is like probably the first time where they actually filmed within the walled city. and where you see this kind of like these criminals who are pretty much like on the run, and they're desperate, they're cornered. But you know, at the same time, the way that kind of Johnny Mac himself as a director had actually kind of used like the camera to kind of like just capture the kind of the grittiness, the seediness of that kind of locale, and the way the camera kind of like, you know, with steady cam shots just kind of literally just kind of going through, following these you know, these crooks and stuff, and the action's captured amazingly, and it's just kind of like nail-biting intense. I mean, the criminals themselves, of course, knowing that they're actually ex-army personnel, they use their weapons expertise and like the kind of like the guerrilla warfare and such, like those kind of skills to kind of battle off against these against cops. And even the cops in this film are just as ruthless as the criminals. They don't really care about kind of like whether there's innocent bystanders or whatnot, and like everyone's for take. And the way that I ain't gonna spoil it, but the way that this scene ends, it's just kind of like, wow. You know, it sticks with you, and you're thinking, wow, it's pretty, you know, pretty intense, nail-biting, it's well acted, and like just again, this film itself is just such an amazing film. We'll be reviewing this as one of my most recent purchases was the 88 Films release of like both 1 and 2. But definitely, I mean, the Wall City Showdown is like, you know, it's a great, one of the best sequences, like, you know, in terms of like gunplay in film history itself. Number 2 is The Killer, the 1989. John Woo, of course, with Chow Yun-fat, Danny Lee, where a cop and an assassin kind of cross paths and eventually kind of form an unlikely bond. And the church showdown. I mean, of course, everyone, you know, there are all the shootouts in this movie, including the one at the club, the beach, the house, and whatnot. I mean, they're all expertly crafted. I mean, I would say this is probably John Woo's like masterpiece when it comes to overall filmmaking, not just action filmmaking. It's just a great story. It's like a work of art. But for me, I mean, the church showdown is just sublime. It's absolutely kind of like just brilliant filmmaking. You know, everything from like the fact that you got these characters, again, he has this kind of very kind of samurai code, you know, Code of the Samurai type of feel to like these characters, and the way that they're kind of like just kind of using their weapons. Again, he applies that kind of like swordsman kind of approach to like, yeah, these weapons are like an extension of themselves. Or the way that the you know, how samurais kind of see that a sword is like kind of like captures their own essence. The guns that these characters are brandishing is capturing these kind of assailants' essence, and they just kind of just, you know, the action is just captured amazingly, which was kind of choreographed by Tong Wai and Ching Siu Tong. It just looks amazing, and even, for example, this film, kind of this sequence itself, is just one of those that sticks in the mind, where you kind of see like the heroes are bloodied and just pretty much exhausted and hurt, and they're willing to kind of like just put their lives on the line just to kill these guys, like everyone, you know, just destroy everything around them just to get out. And yeah, even the sequence where the cool hired assassin who's working for the bad guys, you know, hired to kill Chow Yun-fat, uses a kind of like a shotgun to just kind of like a kind of little kind of like mini kind of like bomb launching thing. He just kind of explodes the statue of Mary in this shoot, and we kind of, that sequence itself of like using Handel's Messiah, that was even Martin Scorsese wrote to John Woo, telling him how much he loved that scene, and you know, he thought that's just, that sequence alone is worthy of the price of the admission. And you know, it's just kind of, it's just an exemplary piece of filmmaking. And even like the way that the scene ends itself is just kind of like, you know, the ending of the film is just kind of like gut wrenching. It's heart wrenching, and it's very kind of very emotional. Just very kind of like just, you know, this is just John Woo's, you know, heroic bloodshed mayhem. Nobody does it better than him. Before we get to the number 1, which pretty much is very much expected of what it's going to be, but I would say, there are some honorable mentions now. The honorable mentions are the finale of Ballistic Kiss, which is Donnie Yen's action movie, which is very underrated, which he also directed, and he plays like an assassin who's kind of wanted by the police and ends up falling in love with the female police officer who's also who's on it, who's kind of like who's out to arrest him, and the ending himself is he's saving her friend, and he kind of like literally just the way that it all starts off, where like kind of Donnie Yen himself is kind of just loading shells into his gun clips, and he's just kind of sitting down, just kind of dressed in all black and his sunglasses, and he just kind of literally just kind of just loads up and just runs through, and he just goes to where these bad guys are, and eventually just kind of just have this really crazy exchange of like guns and bullets, very kind of inspired by John Woo, and the film itself has a very Wong Kar-wai-esque feel to it. And but definitely there's one of my favorite shootouts. The other one is I would say John Woo's Once a Thief. How can we have another one without John Woo? I mean, that was a great sequence at the ending, where highlights being like the way Leslie Chung himself kind of hangs off like the frame of a door in Chow Yun-fat's apartment, and just using a gun to just kind of like kill multiple bad guys, and then just kind of like a cat, he just kind of has the agile kind of like way of landing on his feet, and just offing people one by one. He handled himself pretty well with action, and he was pretty much a very versatile leading man. And of course the Golden Triangle sequence in Police Story 3, which I think again Jackie Chan being known for his his kind of stunts and action in martial arts. I mean, this is like a pretty much again a great transition from like the early Jackie Chan stuff, or the 80s Jackie Chan, to into the 90s, where he's kind of also including like modern day John Woo style gunplay. And of course it was nice to kind of like see like an appearance from veteran Shaw Brothers legend Lo Lee, who's playing the cartel drug lord at the Golden Triangle. Okay, number one, surprise, surprise, it's from the movie Hard Boiled. Again, a magnum opus of action from John Woo, his final Hong Kong movie before he went off to Hollywood in '93. So this 1992 movie again, which is probably my second favorite action movie of all time. I mean, there's so many great action sequences. The whole film itself is just kind of just jam-packed with action and violence and just explosions and bullets and a high body count. But I mean, the action, the way how the shootout in the hospital is phenomenal. It's kind of like just exemplary action filmmaking, where everything's just kind of filmed with such expertise, especially that kind of like that one take shot where Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung are just kind of like just shooting their way through like through like the hospital corridor, getting into an elevator, then going onto the other floor, and then just kind of killing more people and stuff. That was just a great sequence. But for me, I would say the warehouse raid, where Kwon Ho-san's character, Uncle Hoi, who's like another kind of like arms dealer, who's kind of taken out by his rival Johnny Wong, played by Anthony Wong, who's the main villain of the film. And it's just that scene, the way it starts off, where you got kind of like Philip Kwok, who's who plays Mad Dog, who's one of the Johnny Wong's main like henchmen. He kind of like just picks up like a gun and his motorcycle helmet, and he's just walking through, and you see these guys kind of all dressed in black on black motorcycles, just kind of cruising through, like kind of like forming like a motorcade of like carefully sequenced kind of like henchmen on these bikes, and they just kind of zoom into this actual warehouse where they've got like guns and drugs and whatnot being shipped and like being packaged for distribution or something. But then these guys just come in there, just blast everyone through, like kill a bunch of people, and not just shooting them up, but like they're being blown up with guns, with grenades, and even for example, motorcycle, henchmen on motorcycles are just kind of literally just crashing into guys, like just squashing them to death. And you know, even after that sequence itself, it just kind of goes into another sequence where, you know, Chow Yun-fat himself is actually kind of like decided to take on the bad guys. You know, he's kind of like on like a harness and a rope. He just kind of comes through like a, you know, kind of a flap in the roof, where he just decides to kind of, you know, just swing through, and he's there just kind of like, you know, brandishing his machine gun, just kind of like killing people. And then the way he kind of like clips off and rolls over cars. But even the way it starts off, like he just kind of like throws these smoke grenades and just kind of like they all land in sequence. Again, I mean, it shows how John Woo just captures the movement of the camera and action itself. Like it's just kind of, it's perfect, especially when he's working with like the right cinematographers. In this case, again, his regular Wong Wing Hung, who's done amazing work with John Woo over the years. And you know, it is great. I mean, because the way that scene starts off, it's like, okay, yeah, this is a hell of a lot of action. You think, oh my god, how can you get more action packed than this? Just after a little bit of a breather, all of a sudden Chow Yun-fat makes his entry into this actual scene, and then, you know, it's just kind of more incredible action. You know, it's just, that's like, you know, it's just probably one of the best. And even the kind of the standoff, the Mexican standoff between Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung at the end, very intense way of filming it, and the way that these guys are kind of just going at one another, and you know, everything just kind of like blowing up, and the explosions themselves look pretty much very realistic at the same time. You're thinking, what the hell was going through with John Woo's mind, thinking that, yeah, I'm going to put my actors through like pretty much hell and a lot of danger just to capture like some great action sequences. Right, well, okay, that was my my top 10 favorite shootouts from Hong Kong movies. What are your favorite top 10 Hong Kong shootouts? I mean, if you have any, just leave them in the comment section, and just let me know what you think of my picks. And yeah, I'll probably see you on the next video.